It's not necessarily the physical improvements because anyone can train, but I think mentally it sets the bar.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner Sharon Sutton.
My island influencer this week is Will Draper, a triathlete living and training on the Isle of Man. Will started out as a cyclist, winning the British National Championships when he was just 12, and then the British National Madison Championship on the velodrome when he was 16. And for many years, Will loved racing his bike. However, he started to feel like he never got what he was working for. So at the end of the 2017 season, Will took a step back. He looked at where he was and where he wanted to be over the next 2 to 10 years, and that's when he decided to become a triathlete. In 2019, Will won the Under-21 Sportsman of the Year in the Isle of Man, and he's now in his second year racing as a triathlete and not a cyclist. Everything still feels very new in an ever-changing environment, but Will's confidently looking forward towards his ambitious career aspirations. And here's this week's conversation with Will Draper in episode 43 of Island Influencers. Welcome, Will, to the Island Influencers podcast during Isle of Man lockdown 3.0.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
How's life in lockdown been for you just lately?
Well, not too different, to be honest. I have a lifestyle of don't earn much money, don't spend much money, just sit, train, and then sit with my legs up, think about the next session and do that from when the eyes open to the eyes close, really.
Yeah, I'm sure. So your life isn't really too different, you were saying before, to living under lockdown to living as you normally do. Is that right?
No, not too different. I mean, in some ways it's nice because there's more people around the house during the day, but I do miss training with other people as an athlete. I think that brings you on a lot, and we have some really good athletes in each of the disciplines that I compete in, so I can kind of train with groups of different people, and I've been really welcomed into them groups, and I think that's led to some of my success thus far.
Yeah, great. I mean, so for the benefit of our listeners who aren't particularly au fait with what triathlon is, just tell me the disciplines that you do. Pretend I don't know what they are.
Okay, so I compete in triathlon, and I compete in what's called middle distance triathlon. So the shortest distance is sprint, then it goes Olympic, then it goes middle distance, then long distance. Almost, if you compare the sprint distance athlete to the long distance athlete, it's a 1 hour race compared to a 8 hour race, and you'll find that they're completely different styles of athletes. So my races are roughly 4 hours long.
I was going to say, it depends how good you are, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Time spent.
Yeah, it might take you a little bit longer. So I compete in what would effectively be known as a half Ironman, but most people don't understand that. And I didn't even understand when I first started, was that Ironman is just a brand. It's not like a race distance. And that brand just races over middle and long distance. So the race I do involves a 1.9 kilometer swim, and then a 90 kilometer bike, and then a 21.1 kilometer run, which is a half marathon.
That's a long way. My goodness. Well, at a mere 21 years old, Will, we'll go into that in more depth in a minute, the whole history of triathlon and how you got there. But perhaps for the benefit of listeners, you could just tell us a bit about you and your background and where you've got to at a ripe old age of 21. By far the youngest guest I've ever had on Island Influencers.
Yeah, I feel old at heart. I feel like I've been doing sport a very long time. So I started cycling before I was a triathlete. So just one of the three disciplines. That actually started off the back end of my brother used to play football and injured his knee. And then the Kenyugs, who are the mother and father of Pete Kenyug, the Olympic gold medalist from Onken, gave Nathan, my brother, his first bike. And he then started with cycling, and he entered the Isle of Man Manx Youth Tour, which is a British race, but it's held on the Isle of Man. So people come from the UK to compete. Yeah. And he actually finished last in every race, but he still carried on. And,
so did you both go to Dots League?
Yeah, and we went to Dots League. And to be fair to him, he had to stick it out more than me because I started from 9 or 10 years old, I kind of was at that level where most people are just starting. So I managed to work my way up through it. 12 years old, I won the British Championships, whereas he was still catching up because he's 3 years older than me. So
Yeah,
he had
still
it
getting
tough.
beaten his head beaten in every week on the bike.
Yeah, but in fairness, he stuck at it. And when he got to 18 years old, he actually finished top 10 in the world champs, so which is a level I never got to before I made the switch at 17 years old. So, but yeah, up until about 17, 18 years old, I was just a cyclist. I won races on circuit and time trial, and even won national titles on the indoor velodrome and stuff.
Yeah. I always have the greatest respect for Manx cyclists. Well, winning on a velodrome when we don't have one here, that's such an amazing achievement. So, yeah,
it's probably one of my favorite wins I've had, because I did it with another rider, Thomas Bostock. We're both from the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
And at the time, everyone who's 16 years old in the kind of British cycling scene are all competing to get on the Olympic development program as juniors.
Yes. Yeah.
And we kind of showed up to this race where all the scouts were, and we won it. And it was mainly tactical as well. It wasn't even that we like brute strength it. We somehow, from a place with no velodrome, we won against all the guys that trained on it regularly. So yeah, we've had
that was amazing.
From the Isle of Man, it makes you do stand quite fair in these competitions. I think it makes you a strong rider.
So that was the Madison Championship that you won with Thomas Bostock.
Yeah, so that's where two riders compete in a team together to win a race which has like intermediate sprints and a final sprint at the end for cumulative points. So there's quite a lot of tactics. It's on the velodrome.
There's a lot of skill. Like you see the hand slingshot. How on earth do you do that without falling off on a fixed
at any
bike?
One moment, the
and not crash into anyone else.
I know it's luckily the size of the field wasn't too big, because I actually went back and raced in London at the 6-day cycling event in the under 21 Cup last year, or 2019 now, the end of 2019, with one of my friends who lives in London, and that was against all the Belgium and the Netherlands guys that race professionally. And it was a little bit more sketchy when the speeds are higher, everyone's a bit bigger compared to when we were 16, and I was well and truly into my sort of triathlon ways at that point. So maybe fell a bit out of my depth, but it was nice to take myself out of that comfort zone and try race like I used to when I was just a cyclist.
Before you decided to leave school and move into a professional sports career, how old were you? I'm asking you this because I know the answer to this, but when did you leave school?
So I left school at 16 years old. So
go on, but you're way too modest. What exams did you get, Will? How many exams did you pass before you passed up the chance to go to the sixth form?
Yeah, so I did some of my GCSEs I did early. It feels like so long ago now. I did some early. I did my English, science and maths early, where I got 2 A's, A star, and then I'm not sure if the curriculum still works under these grade categories.
Everyone knows what an A star is.
Yeah, and then I was the same. I managed to I could do additional GCSEs in different things, such as statistics and media, and it was A and A star across the board. But I felt like my brother had previously tried to do sixth form and couldn't balance the two, because as a cyclist, you do have to race internationally from once you turn 17. That's where the sport takes you. And I now I feel like I definitely could have done it, because as you get older, you realize that it's not the biggest thing in the world at that point. But at the time, it feels like it is. But I kind of had a mentality of, if your back is against the wall, then you can only go forward. So I tried to almost take away more than one opportunity and just thought, I'll solely focus on this and maybe that'll be the best outcome. But in hindsight, if I was going to tell anyone what to do, I'd say, well, to be honest, from 16 to 18, it's not going to make too much of a difference unless you're an exceptional athlete that can earn significant amount of money. You're not really going to lose out if you just wait another 2 years.
True, but not everybody is, what's the word you just used for, a significantly talented student to get A stars across the board and A grades in your GCSEs, to then you're going to be able to pick that up at some point in the future. Yeah,
that was my other thing as well, is that I felt like I have a good ability to read stuff and memorize it and relay it quite well, and that's something that I haven't had to kind of focus on. I know that a lot of people in the classes I was in would dedicate as much hours as I did to the training that they would to the studying.
Yeah.
So I always felt like that I had an advantage, that by luck, I guess, or by environment, I managed to be able to kind of handle school quite well. And if I ever wanted to go back to it, I'm sure I could pick it up at some point.
I'm sure.
But I would want to do that knowing that I gave sport like all that I had to give it.
Exactly, and that's where we're at to today. So you started out as a cyclist, and then at age 17, it was, I think, you decided that actually you didn't want to be a cyclist anymore.
Yeah, that's true. So I raced from throughout the age of 17. I did race as a cyclist. I raced in Europe. I was on a very good team. We had a budget of, I think, £300,000 between 9 riders, which at that age was like pretty much unheard of across Europe. So we could do like the biggest events, and we were on the best equipment, and they would pay for my travel from the island to anywhere in Europe where we were racing. And but I mean, that kind of support physically was good, but I mean, the mental support maybe was lacking. In hindsight, it was almost put quite a lot of pressure on the athletes to perform, and it was quite a business environment rather than like just work hard and we'll be proud of you, whatever. It's like, why aren't you getting the results kind of thing. So, but basically what happened was I achieved a qualifying standard for the Commonwealth Games, which was due to be held in the Gold Coast in 2018. My qualifying standard was achieved with a time trial lap of the TT course. So individual time trial, you had to ride under 1 hour, 33 minutes. And I rode, I think, 1 hour, 31.
I think I remember you doing that. We were marshalling, I believe.
Yeah. Which I was only young as well. I was only 17. I think that was the longer distance tend to suit me better. And the only problem with that qualifying standard was that it was achieved in a time trial, whereas to go to the Commonwealth Games, I could only go on the velodrome because of my age being under 18.
Of course.
So the selection committee from the Isle of Man sport understood that, and unfortunately I wasn't selected, which is understandable because I didn't achieve the standard where it was. And if I went, it would have been solely an experience thing. I didn't think I was going to go there and kind of win any medals. But throughout that winter, I was waiting to kind of find out whether I would be racing at the games or not. And then I thought initially I'll try and do both because it was quite a big step backwards to take up triathlon, having to learn 2 new sports in swimming and running. But then I just thought, like, why am I even trying to do both? I was like, I want to try triathlon. So yeah, I made the decision to switch. And then in 2018, I kind of started my triathlon journey.
Yeah. So how did you go about that?
So initially, I just followed what's called the British Super Series, which is like where your Brownlees would have came from. And that's like a junior series. I remember going away with my best mate, and we had to do this qualifier because the series is so popular. You have to go to Loughborough to do like a test at the start of the year. And then from there, they take forward, I think, 40 athletes to do the races.
Yeah.
So the test was 180 people. I was, I think, second to last in the swim, and I actually swam like a really fast time for what I was capable of. I did what I needed to do. And then on the second day, you would do the bike and the run separately to the swim. And so I started like 180th. And I had my deficit that I'd already lost in the swim, and I managed to ride past about 120 cyclists, youth triathletes, and work my way up. And I ended up coming in, I think I was about 30th. So I got into this series, but it proved rather difficult as I was stood on the start line with people on average in the top 40 across all 3 disciplines, whereas I was like, on average, I was like 180th in the swim. So in every swim, I was so far behind, and it looked like I was terrible, but it was just that everyone in between had been seeded out. So I then looked into it a bit more and decided that the longer distance races would suit me because they're so dominant on bike performance and stuff like that. Time trial around the TT course, the fact that I was able to produce that kind of result at that age meant that I felt my strengths on the bike actually did correlate quite well to a longer triathlon.
You have a big engine.
Yeah, steady and slow. So But that's how I think I prefer, rather than these races. Like every kid is there trying to be the next Brownlee, and they all want to get on this Olympic development team, and they're faster than I first thought when I kind of got into it. But,
yeah. So how did you go about improving at your swim? Because you have improved at your swim a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, swimming's really difficult. There's a lot of people that say you can't get into it at an older age, whereas I think I'm right on the barrier between like starting at 18 is like you're not an adult, but you're not a kid anymore. So you're kind of in between. But I find I train a lot with the squad, which is the Isle of Man swim squad. They've been welcoming to me, and I kind of tag on the back of the lane. It's normally kind of ranked off of ability, each lane, as well as age. But I think that some of the younger swimmers probably had to ask, like, who am I? Because I'm on the back of the fastest lane, and I'm always getting like lapped. So I have to just wait and let them pass through. Because that's the only problem with that style of swimming, is that we could have up to sort of 6, 7, 8 guys in the lane, and the first swimmer will set off is the fastest swimmer, and then everyone sets off 5 seconds apart. So by the time I set off as the slowest swimmer, I've got the fastest swimmer coming back down towards me. So that makes you faster when you feel like you're going to get in the way of one of these top swimmers and ruin their session. So I've had times when I've just been sprinting just to not get caught.
It comes to mind a scene from one of the Marvel movies when you've got Captain America running laps of the monument in Washington, going past the guy that became, the man with the wings.
Yeah.
On your left.
On the military camp, yeah.
That's
how it is.
On your left. Okay, I think I can imagine what that's like. And so what about running? Tell us about running, the other discipline, because you seem to be pretty handy at that, from what I've seen, doing 35-minute 10K runs at the end of triathlons already. That's showing a significant talent.
So I managed to start off running with a little bit more of a head start than swimming in comparison to the standard of athletes I was competing against. I think that running is broken down into 3 main parts, which is VO2 max, which is your ability to utilize oxygen, basically from the air into your blood. Your lactate tolerance, which is your ability to kind of handle lactate, and at what point your body produces too much lactate that it slows down essentially, and you go anaerobic. And then the third one is running economy. So out of the 3, I'd already trained the first 2 through cycling for so many years. So it was just about the running economy, and I felt like I had quite a good understanding of my body, and I used to just sit and watch YouTube and stuff all the time and work out the best ways to run, and would actively record myself. I have videos from all throughout my kind of triathlon journey of me running, and even now I look back at older ones and can pick out where I kind of went wrong, but at the time I kind of went through that. And as you say, now I put in some cases my run is more competitive than my bike, because I can produce one straight after the other. Whereas
anybody who's ever done a triathlon will know that the transition from the bike to the run feels like you are running with somebody else's legs, because the blood is entirely the wrong muscles. Yeah,
that's definitely how I felt throughout 2019. But last year and this year now, I feel a lot stronger, and sometimes I even prefer the kind of the feeling of being warmed up from the bike and going into the run.
Yeah, that makes you pretty special, Will. in some way. I'm not quite sure what.
If I run them straight up, then it's pretty quick. It's pretty taxing. So at least I do get to settle down a little bit with the run off the bike.
But the run itself is the one that's load bearing. How have you fared with your injuries on running? Have you picked up any?
I'm pretty much just from one injury to the next. I had a childhood. I mean, throughout being younger, my primary source of physical exercise was sat down, because I was sat on a bike. And because I was national champion at 12, I felt like I was quite serious from a young age. Yeah. So I wouldn't go out playing football and stuff. I'd rather do like an indoor bike workout. So you never build up that bone density that kind of comes with growing up as a kid.
Interesting. Yeah.
I would even at sort of 15, 16, I wouldn't have to do PE in school. They'd allow me to go home to train. And when I wasn't training, I'd just sit on the couch. I'd be tired. I wouldn't want to go out. I wouldn't want to walk about. And I've seen studies that have shown that there's like a significant reduction in bone strength in cyclists especially compared to athletes that compete in sports that are load bearing, such as gymnastics. There was a study that was on Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, you know, the television program. It's a popular television program where they kind of test out some myths. And my brother's ex-girlfriend was the cyclist they used, so it was someone we actually knew. And I think the bone density was about 10-15% lower than average. So that's just compared to a stat like your average person. And gymnasts, and I think it was hockey players or something, they were both about 15-20% higher. It might have been cricketers and gymnasts. So that transfer across has came with its injuries, but luckily I'm able to run fast off of low mileage. So that's where I like to tell people, like, oh, there's a lot more to come, because I know that as soon as I can get that mileage up to what would be similar to those of my competitors, I'm sure that the speeds will also go up, which is quite nice to know that you've got room to develop.
Sure. So what do you do to relax when you're not training? How do you keep your life in balance?
So, well, when I was just cycling, I didn't do as much volume as I do now. I tend to find myself training 2 or 3 times a day at the minute. So it does take up a lot of my time, but I like to just play kind of on the Xbox with my friends and stuff. Sometimes I can't be bothered playing, and it's more just the social aspect that you go on and 4 or 5 of your friends are there and you can kind of chat to each other. Yeah. So that's my way of kind of chilling out, I'm sure.
Especially at this time of lockdown 3. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I see a lot of other pro athletes do it as well, so I know that it's not too bad. It's a nice way to kind of keep the legs up and chill out. But
good. So I mean that, you know, the relaxation part is very important when you've got such of a full-on training schedules, like training 3 times a day. You have 3 disciplines to train for. That must be very time consuming. So it's important to do some R&R. So Xbox recovery is very important. Yes.
Yeah.
What about your success once you got into triathlon? Once you'd improved your times, how did you transition through that? How did you get to where you are now? Because you had some really incredible. I thought it was incredible achievement by the back end of when you were accepted into the professional triathlete ranks.
Yeah, so
that's the first time ever a Manx athlete's been successful in those lofty heights.
Yeah, it is the first time a Manx athlete has become a professional triathlete, I believe. So I did my first 70.3, which we discussed at the start, was that kind of middle distance triathlon. I did my first one of them in Staffordshire, which is the town of my uncle, in mid 2019. And at the point in that race, about halfway through the run, I was leading out of the age group athletes. So there's professional, and then behind them age group athletes compete. So you can still win, but you just aren't the fastest on the day, which is nice about triathlon compared to other sports. But anyway, I ended up kind of not getting my nutrition right, which is very important over them races. Yeah. And I fell short. I had to kind of walk the back half of the run mostly. And I think I finished 3rd in the end. And the guy who won actually earned his professional license then.
Right.
So at one point I was ahead of him. So I nearly kind of earned that professional license at my first event.
Gosh.
But yeah, I kind of live and learn. And looking back at the training sessions I was putting in before that race, I'm kind of astonished I got round as well as I did. And then my next race was at the World Championships, because that qualified me for the World Championships.
Where was that? Was that
which
France?
That was in France, so in Nice. And just 6 weeks prior, I had a really good race in London where I was about 10 minutes quicker than the course record, which was actually set by a professional Ironman athlete. So
wow,
he's not like, he wasn't the top, like a top guy, but I kind of did a swim, and then the bike was about 2 hours long, and then I ran like a 34-minute 10K feeling pretty controlled. So I was really excited going into the World Championships. But unfortunately, I had like a crash in the 10-mile time trial series, which is like the local time trial series, just 6 weeks before. So for about 3 weeks, I couldn't train.
Road rash,
and then it got to the race, and on the bike, you have what's called a power meter, which tells you how hard you physically push the pedals. And the numbers on there were like 20% less than what I had done in London. So I was definitely underperforming. But that being said, I picked up like a sponsor because I broke my bike. I picked up a sponsor that was in the works for a new bike on short notice. So maybe I kind of tricked them into short notice kind of joining up. But yeah, everything
that's
comes
great.
with its pros and cons. But
Yeah.
then I finished 9th in the end in the World Champs. So what could have been if I hadn't been injured was I think I could have won, but
It's still not bad in your first World Championship.
no, and I was only 19 as well, so I would have been the youngest winner. This is just of the age group category, so the professionals were still faster.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, on the bike, I took it to some of them, to be fair. My third race was in 2020 in September, so that's how long I had to wait from September 2019 till September 2020.
Yeah.
I did some smaller races in between, but this was the third kind of 70.3.
Yeah.
And that was in Nottingham, which is where I got my professional license. So
yeah, and that was sort of just when the UK wasn't quite in lockdown, but it was still all socially distanced type.
Yeah, it was
COVID.
weird. It was weird. And there was a lot of difficulty training for an event like that when you don't know if it's going to happen, because you want to give it everything, but in the back of your mind, you don't know whether it's for nothing.
And that racing that you're sort of lacking, I suppose, that affects your performance too.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely a racer at heart. Like I train to race and I love racing, and whether I win or lose, that's what fuels my training. It highlights
on your back. It always makes you try a bit harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you do that? Did I read on the local papers, I believe, that you'd done pretty well in one of these virtual triathlons, so like an all singing, dancing version of Swift for triathlon. Is that right?
Yeah. So at the start of 2020, they being Ironman launched a virtual triathlon race series, which was, fortunately for me, just bike and run, because they couldn't do the swimming with the pools closed. So it did work to my advantage, but it was the first time I was able to race against the professionals as an amateur, excluding the world champs, where I was obviously off the back end of that crash, so I didn't really know how I'd compare. And they had 4 pros in each race weekly, and I almost acted as this 5th pro, because I would never finish 4th. I would always be kind of 1st or 2nd or 3rd. So I got quite a lot of good coverage, and a lot of people kind of said to me like, oh, I heard that you were trying to be pro, and I didn't know if that would actually work out for you. And I've watched you in these races, and I can see why you think that now. So it served as a good opportunity for me, and that wouldn't have come if COVID hadn't come around. So yeah, I got to race some talented guys and kind of take it to them and prove to myself that, like, yeah, I could do it. Yeah,
that's great. That's a really great story. So let's just move on to the questions, if that's okay, that I ask all our guests. It's of all the things you've done so far in your life up to age 21, Will, what's been for you the major achievement?
It's difficult, really, because I feel I'm so future driven that all the major achievements are yet to happen.
That's fine. That's a really great answer, actually.
Yeah, maybe just it's the achievement in itself, just like having the confidence to have like dropped the cycling and take up the triathlon. I think it wasn't a race result, but it was definitely something that came with a lot of like sacrifice and risk, and people saying like, why are you bothering doing that? And in the long run, it paid off. And I have feelings towards like my goals over the next 5 years that just weren't there at all with cycling. So I know for sure that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, you feel more fulfilled from it as a result.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like whatever I was lacking in cycling, I've definitely found with the added 2 disciplines, make it harder.
in this time of COVID, being at some point in lockdown, but maybe not in a few weeks, what's the best things about living in the Isle of Man?
I just think the terrain is obviously something that a lot of people talk about, but they talk about it because it's true. It makes you strong, it makes you tough. The community as well is kind of underestimated, how you want to prove your kind of worth to the island, and everyone's proud of what you do, and that kind of carries you through them difficult sessions.
Yeah, that's true. Then, it's really important, Yeah,
it is. It's surprising that what a little 3 legs a man flag on the side of your race jersey does for you. And then as well, outside of lockdown, just the running, cycling, and swimming communities on the Isle of Man are very, very good standard, and they're very welcoming. And being able to train, although I'm the first pro triathlete, being able to train the three disciplines with the guys and girls of the standard that they are, it's what pulls me on across all three. And it's not just physically make you stronger, it's kind of mentally, they set the bar high.
Yeah.
And that gives you a good perspective on what you need to be like to achieve. Like, I go out on the club run and it's just as hard as racing some of the best triathletes in the world. And it's like, because you know that, or not, maybe not the club run, maybe one of the local races.
Yeah.
But yeah, the standard of the athletes over here for such a small island is so high that it sets the bar. It's not necessarily the physical improvements, because anyone can train, but I think mentally it sets the bar. And you go out and there's someone who's 65 years old giving you a hard time riding around Derby. That
you talked about Sconnor.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's Tony Varley for the benefit of our listeners who's 65.
Yeah, and then I'll have his son Christian in the afternoon take me around the NSC on his 2 feet just as hard. So that's what you get over here. You get character, and it takes you a long way.
Yeah, no, that's great. It is. Sport in the Isle of Man is, I suppose, one of its best key features. So, Will, tell us, what have you got planned next? Because it's so exciting to hear about your career and being so future driven and focused. So what does that future look like, as far as you can tell, within the confines of the global pandemic that's hopefully retreating soon? Yeah,
it's difficult to kind of have that plan, because obviously when COVID first came about, in my head, many other people's heads, I assume, it was just a thing that was maybe going to affect your 6-month or your 12-month goals. But it's kind of become so prevalent now that it affects everyone's 5-year goals plus, because of the fact that it's lasted over a year now, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow up too much. But luckily, events are getting put on, and when they do get put on, there's a lot of praise for the organisers. So I'm hoping that that's kind of inspired people. And now that I've earned my professional license, I have a little bit more of a card to play in terms of travel, and some races are restricted to professional only, so I can get in on that accord. At the minute, my first race I'm hoping to do is on the 6th of June in Poland, so that'll be an Ironman 70.3. Yeah. And it was one of the first races in Europe, which is convenient, but last year there was only 2 European Ironman branded races that were held, and one of them was in Estonia and the other one was in Poland. So I'm hoping that, because they held one last year, that the government must obviously be quite available to provide. Competent. Yeah, quite competent to provide a safe event and be confident that it's not going to be what causes a spike in cases. Yeah, they have to be very careful. But, there's a full calendar of cycling going on in Europe right now. Although I noticed that the Paris-Nice hasn't gone to Nice for the 2nd year in a row, has it? But it's still... No, the cycling, they set a good example, to be fair. They do, especially with a lot of research that I've kind of read and listened to, is showing how much the disease is affecting people that aren't healthy, and that have underlying health conditions, and the healthy population seem to be relatively okay with what's going on. So it'd be nice to kind of keep sport at all levels up, because obviously professional level sport promotes grassroots level sport, which is kind of healthy living, isn't it? So and it's inspiring for the rest of us couch potatoes. So yeah, it's nice to just watch something on TV and feel like it's in normality again. I'm not sure if anyone's been watching the cricket in India. Them stadiums have been absolutely full, so that gives me hope. Okay. Beyond Poland, anything planned? Just that's the eyes on Poland first. So after Poland, there's supposed to be a race in Staffordshire the week after, but that is currently sold out, so they don't have a pro category race. Normally it doesn't matter for a professional if it's sold out or not. You can normally, if they don't have a pro race on, you can apply to race in the age group one. So you're going to try and do that? Yeah, I mean, I've spoke to them and it's difficult. I will be in Stafford anyway, I believe, because I'm doing a race on the 20th of June in the UK, so there's no point of me returning to isolate. So I was going to stay at my uncle's in Staffordshire. So hopefully I'll get a race. I might have to try and find an age grouper who will do like a direct swap with me, but I'm sure there's some that might not feel fit enough to go straight into it because they're all deferred from last year. So
right, okay, of course.
Yeah, they might not actually be that interested in racing. So fingers crossed.
Right. So I know you said before that you like to play on the Xbox, but have you read any books? Have you got any books that you've read recently that you'd recommend to listeners as a source of inspiration, or just a good read?
I've actually been doing quite a lot of reading of like medical journals. I think you would describe them as medical journals,
right.
or studies.
Page turner.
Yeah, they're quite hard to digest, but once you understand the format, so if you go on like Google Scholar or PubMed or NCBI, these are like journals that have been published by scientists. So the reason I like them is because you know that they're real. They're not set out with an underlying agenda. Like maybe some of the books, they want to sell the books, so they kind of have a good attention grabbing title kind of thing, and maybe underlying it's just sort of rambling on. So I found I've been looking at studies on like runners and cyclists and triathletes and athletes and what you can do to improve performance, and just everything from studies that show the best length of efforts, and that includes weighing up like the rate of perceived exertion. So something that you wouldn't necessarily think about is like, although there's efforts that might bring a slightly better physiological benefit, if psychologically they mean you can't do any more for the rest of the week, then they're not the right length. So it's helped me as an athlete who coaches myself. I've read all these new studies and stuff that give me a real good understanding of the science, and then just stuff like injuries and that, what kind of foods and different protocols that people do, and stretching, whether that works, foam rollering, whether that works, and understanding all this stuff. I feel like there's a concept within sport, especially cycling, called marginal gains, which is where you break everything up into really small pieces and you improve them just a tiny bit. And all these little tiny increases that on their own, they don't really do much. But if you marry them all back together, then they make quite a significant difference. So I find reading this kind of stuff is making me improve everything slightly. And I hope that when it all comes back together, it'll have a noticeable difference.
Great. That's great. Do you have a favourite quote, Will?
My favourite, well, I have quite a few quotes that I kind of remind myself of, but I guess a good one at the minute is victories are earned when no one's watching, which is one that, like, at the minute, being in lockdown and training a lot of the time on your own, that is where you'll win a race, or you'll find your success. A lot of people, when I race, especially locally, say like, "Oh, you make it look so effortless." But it's like, oh, if you see me like lay on the floor in my garage after the interval session, you wouldn't say the same thing.
I'm sure they wouldn't.
So I have another quote, which I wrote in an article one time, which said, the only way to get better is to surround yourself in people that believe in you. So I'm fortunate enough to have a great kind of family life that backs me, which is, I think, a massive advantage, which people can't always get the choice.
We haven't mentioned Mel and Brian, and yet Mel was your mum and dad. Mel was such a fast runner and a great swimmer too. And
my dad and my granddad both were bay swimmers and all that, did all the ones back in the day. So I'm hoping that genetic swimming gene is going to come out soon. It's just waiting.
I think it already has. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So
there's that saying, isn't it Freud who said he answered the question to is it nature or nurture? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's a great quote. But yeah, it makes a huge difference, the family aspect. Because some people may know that my dad was chief fire officer, but he managed to retire before the age of 50, which meant for me that throughout all my time as a cyclist and a triathlete, he's been there with mum to kind of support me. Obviously financially, because I wasn't earning any money at sort of 16, 17, but again, just like mentally and physically and being there. So it goes a long way, having that team around, and obviously the great sponsors. I'm not sure if you've mentioned to to the listeners the support that Thornton have gave to me over the past several years since I started on my own kind of journey.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to support you, Will. You know, you're an inspiration to so many, but we're just one of a few sponsors that you've managed to amass, and you know, we're thrilled to keep going and see how much you can achieve on this dream of yours, which is you know, it's a dream for the community, I think.
No, I really appreciate it, and it makes sessions a little bit more motivated when you know you got a team kind of there for you. So
yeah, no, it's great. It's great to see you all blinged up and all your sponsored gear. That's cool.
Yeah, it's quite a business actually compared to cycling. And cycling, you just sign a contract and it's all there for you, and you don't really have to do much for it. But in triathlon, you have your physical improvements. You need to get faster, but then you need to make the sport sustainable. So you need to sort out how you're gonna progress, especially like over the next few years. I need to think about how I'm going to make a sustainable income to have like a property, which isn't always the easiest thing when you're rolling off of 1-year contracts.
No, it isn't. And you've had a good bit of support, not just financially, from the Sports Council, Isle of Man Sport as well. They've been a good support, I guess, over the years in some way.
Yeah, they're really good. They know that support goes further than just financial support, so they put on different workshops. They have the ability to use the gym. I'm always using the physio. The massages that I get are through Isle of Man Sport. So that bodywork stuff is something that I really want to kind of invest more in the future. You hear a lot of big athletes talk about the amount of money that they spend on looking after their body, because at the end of the day, it's like being a racing car driver. You need to look after your car.
Yeah.
So, I need to just moving forward. There's a lot of things that I have planned to make me better, and I'm looking forward to kind of doing them and seeing the results.
Yeah, that's great. No, thanks very much, Will. So where can our listeners go to learn more about you and all the things that you're doing?
To follow my journey, the best place to go would be my Instagram.
And tell who can figure out how that works.
Yeah, it's a little bit. That's where I've had to jump on board the bandwagon of trying to be quite up to date with that stuff, because a lot of the older pros almost fell behind with some of the guys that are nowhere near as talented as them, but they can sell themselves well on social media, and that gives them bigger contracts. I guarantee that all my UK-based sponsors, if I didn't have social media accounts, wouldn't be interested, because I just couldn't provide a platform to.
You've got some competition locally on Instagram, haven't you? With Amy, your girlfriend.
Yeah, so my partner has over, I think, 120,000 followers now. She's just signed
Amy Kringle.
Yeah, she's just signed with Gymshark, so she's got on a really good journey as well.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, so and they're very supportive, but I mean, there's sides to that kind of stuff that you don't see, and it does put a lot of pressure on people to perform up to, because you're signed in to post certain content at certain times, and it can be quite overwhelming. But I think that's just an overthinking thing, and it's just about like finding a balance between entertaining, a little bit of education, and a little bit of sort of selling and advertising on the side, just to keep your sponsors happy and all that. But yeah, Instagram is at Will_Draper, and I have a Facebook page as well.
Right, okay.
Which hopefully
we'll put them in the show notes.
Type in Will Draper,
we'll put it in the show notes, so don't worry about that. Lovely.
Yeah, but it's just hard because normally I'm updating with races and there's no races.
Sure.
So it's just like, I'm still training, guys. So don't worry.
It's good to see all the pictures of you guys training hard, so keep it coming. Great.
Yeah, I have to try and stay active.
Yes, I'm sure you will. Thanks so much, Will, for joining me today on Island Influencers. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I hope I've brought a little bit of insight. I know I've not had too much influence just yet, but I'm hoping to get more involved. There's a junior triathlon coming up, so anyone with youngsters, get them down to that. I'm going to try and get involved in the back end of April. And I really hope that I can use my ability as an athlete to be a bit of a platform to help out the community and stuff, whichever way possible.
Thanks, Will. You are an influencer.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Island Influencers from Thornton Chartered Financial Planners. To find out more and for useful links, visit thorntonfs.com/podcasts.